You lie to yourself at times, now you're falling apart. Soon giving in this time, 'cause we're falling apart.
Coming to you live from the bunker. This is the first ever special live report of JW Watch, the show that keeps a close eye on all things JW, offering Jehovah's Witnesses a more objective viewpoint on current developments that the governing body almost certainly doesn't want them to hear. Yesterday in Australia, confusing articles appeared in the Australian, a reputable newspaper in its eponymous country, strongly suggesting that the charitable status of Jehovah's Witnesses had been or was about to be revoked. Authored by journalist Keiran Gair, the articles have led many current and former witnesses, wondering whether these revelations are true and what court documents have triggered them. Joining me live from Australia to report, hence live report, on what's going on, is my colleague, Kim Silvio. Hello, Kim.
Hi, good morning.
Well, it is morning, literally where you are. Is it like 5 or something?
Yeah, it's 5 a.m. Mm-hmm.
And as we're going to reveal, as this show unfolds, we're going to understand that this sort of whole thing is really unnecessary. So I think that the fact that you are getting up so early to explain all of this is incredibly gracious of you. So thank you for doing that.
No problem.
I thought we could begin by sharing some of these, or both of these articles that have caused all this confusion, which when they went up were behind paywalls. So, oh God, now I need to, I always fail miserably when it comes to getting these things up quickly, but I will do my very best. So, application window, original article, there we go. So, here we have the original article that went up on the Australian, again, published by Keiran Gair on the 18th. Are you seeing it okay there, Kim?
Yeah, that's fabulous.
Exclusive. Jehovah's Witnesses facing tax turmoil. The secretive Christian group has begun legal action against the charity watchdog after it quietly revoked the organization's tax-exempt status over concerns with its opaque global structure. Am I right in saying, Kim, that for reasons we're going to see, this is a factually incorrect subheading?
Absolutely. Yeah, 100% factually incorrect.
And why is that?
Because they didn't secretly do anything, for starters. Everybody knows that they've been put on notice over their charitable status. And secondly, they didn't at all revoke the organization's charitable status.
Easy for you to say.
Yes, so easy not. And it had nothing to do, this whole matter has nothing to do with its opaque global structure at all.
Okay, thank you. So, and then it goes on to explain that that this legal action has taken place against Australia's charity control body. There's this whole thing, which I know is a major bee in your bonnet, about funding the organisation's charity, the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society of Australia, which recorded revenue of 32 million in the year through August 31st, has been accused of taking money from abroad after directors waste 16 million of their total expenses on undeclared donations and foreign aid. This seems to be a repeated accusation levelled by, how can I put it diplomatically, a contingent of ex-Jehovah's Witnesses in Australia who feel that the way the organisation manages its finances could be subverted so that victims aren't allowed access to redress. Would that be correct?
Yeah, absolutely. They've also said, the article doesn't explain very well, but it says 16 million of their total expenses of undeclared donations. That'll become relevant later on when we look at the court documents. But yeah, they're basically, there's alluding to that fact that they're trying to get rid of the money out of Australia, and that's not the case.
Okay.
I mean, they are getting the money out of Australia, but not for the reasons that is specified.
All branches, it's no secret at all that all branches of Jehovah's Witnesses send their money to America. That's how it works.
Absolutely.
But as we've pointed out, this shouldn't be any kind of stumbling block when it comes to redress, because as you pointed out in a previous live stream, worst case scenario, the Sydney Bethel gets sold to pay for the redress, and that should cover it comfortably.
Or the Assembly Hall, either one.
Indeed, exactly. There's lots of assets there that could be freed up. There's a lawyer quoted here, Alex Spencer. I'm fascinated to know how he got involved in this all. But what's interesting is we've already started using different language. You see there it says, if the record were removed. In other words, the charity's record. And, we began with a subheading that says, past tense, it's been revoked. And already, and this was why it was so confusing, Kim, when I first read it, because it seemed as though it's almost as though someone different had written the subheading than the person who'd written the article. It's already confusing.
Or that multiple people were working on the article and they've sort of smushed it together. That's a technical term too. But yeah, it's very it's very poorly written. I couldn't believe when I read it. I thought, really?
Yeah, the withdrawal from the Register of Charities would be an extraordinary result. In other words, it hasn't happened yet. So all of this is just really speculation. It's not actually commenting on something that has happened. And what also caught my eye from like a critical thinking point of view was where it quotes from Terence O'Brien, who I've actually met and weirdly shaken the hand of. I'm not sure whether that's something I should be proud of. But it quotes Terence O'Brien as saying, the ACNC has assured directors that they have no intention of revoking Watchtower Australia's charitable status, Mr. O'Brien said. Now, given, the organisation in question, which is intensely geared towards leveraging or exploiting any sort of pushback from the government and claiming that it's persecution, given the way the organisation traditionally reacts to any sort of pushback of this kind, why would O'Brien lie about this? He's literally saying the ACNC has told us they have no intention of revoking our status. If there was even the slightest whiff of that happening, Terence O'Brien would be crying persecution, wouldn't he?
Absolutely, that's exactly right. And I think that when he's quoted there, he's talking in the present time. So he's saying, as at right now, that is the case. And I actually agree with him. It's probably the first time I'd ever agree with Terence O'Brien in my life, possibly the last. But what he actually said there, I believe to be true. At this moment, then they have no intention of revoking his charitable status.
Okay. So that's basically the article. Again, a bit sad really that it's behind a paywall. I understand that different newspapers need to figure out different ways of funding their journalism, but probably just as well in a way, because this will limit the reach of what is essentially misinformation, as we're going to very clearly demonstrate. So then there was a follow-up article. Let me just get it ready. And how long, how quickly did this follow-up article go up? Do we know how many hours roughly, or?
It's nearly 24 hours. So I understand that
Okay.
the original article went up on Sunday evening, our time, and it's now Tuesday morning, and this article went up Monday afternoon.
Okay.
So yeah, about 20 hours.
So again, the reason why the the formatting doesn't seem very newspaperly is because this is a copy and paste. You would have
Yeah.
to be a subscriber to the Australian to see everything in nice gleaming formatting. But here it begins by saying the charitable arm of the Jehovah's Witnesses, Watchtower Australia, says the organisation has resolved legal action with the charity watchdog after it threatened to revoke its tax-exempt status last November, which is sort of what it said in the original article. It just got buried further down. And what this PDF doesn't actually display, I should just mention, is there was another subheading. We commented earlier that the subheading for the first article was factually incorrect. And then the next subheading says, the title is Jehovah's Witnesses Resolve Legal Stoosh. No, it's a word that's escaped. Stoush. It's a word that has escaped my vocabulary so far, I must say. With Charity Watchdog, the Jehovah's Witnesses say they have resolved legal action with Australia's Charity Watchdog after it threatened to revoke their tax-exempt status. So from one subheading to another, we've gone from this is something that's happened to it's something that was threatened to happen.
There were discussions.
And that's the sort of thing you would think that would merit a retraction, That's a factually incorrect statement that leads people. And in this particular issue, this is a very sensitive issue where you have, abuse survivors involved who have very, very strong feelings about this organization and whether it has charitable status or not. There's a journalistic responsibility here to correct false information. So, so it just goes on. In fact, they informed us that the matter is closed. Again, this was already reported. Mr. O'Brien said any suggestion that the Commission had revoked the organisation's charitable status was simply false and misleading. Do you agree with him there?
Yes, absolutely, definitely.
Kim Silvio agreeing with.
I know, it's very foreign. I'm like, oh, I don't like this idea of agreeing with them.
Oh dear.
Not a good idea. It's an uncomfortable feeling for me.
Last year, the ACNC issued a notice to the charity to show cause why it should not be deregistered.
Yes.
He said. When the charity responded to the show cause notice, we asked for an undertaking that 21 days notice be given before any adverse decision. The ACNC did not accede to the request to provide the 21 days notice. Therefore, on 8th of April, we applied to the court to prevent revocation of our charity status. Was the charitable status, in your view, Kim, in any real risk of being revoked at that point?
Yes.
On the 8th of April?
Oh, no. I beg your pardon. Not on the 8th of April, but in November, yes. I believe
in November
that they
it was.
were at risk.
Yeah.
But no, by April, no, absolutely not. I don't believe that there wasn't any. I think this is just an absolute overreaction and a shoring up of their position by Watchtower. They, there was a notice outstanding and they could have commenced and actually actioned the notice at that point. And I think that Watchtower have moved to legally ensure that they have protection from that happening.
Jehovah's Witnesses are not facing tax turmoil, Mr. O'Brien said. The ACNC has never questioned the charity's donation structure. Neither has the ACNC accused the charity of misuse of funds either in Australia or overseas. Is that accurate? Because I know we're going to go into, I guess we'll see for ourselves shortly, but we're going to go into some of these documents that kind of all of this is based on. Did the ACNC have any issues at all about the way money is moved around?
No, he is correct in very, very, very persnickety terms. He is correct in that they haven't questioned the Charitable's donation structure, but we'll see later on what they did. How that could be seen as a little bit incorrect, but on the surface level, yeah, that's correct.
So the ACNC basically back in November, before the organisation had finally relented and joined the redress scheme, wrote to the organisation and said, FYI, you're about to have your charitable status removed, as has already been explained multiple times in multiple different ways by multiple different people and agencies.
Yeah.
And so then what happened was the organisation, as we've already covered on JW Watch, at the 11th hour, changed their minds. Again, money talks. They weren't going to lose their charitable status for any reason. They realised the Australian government was serious, and they issued a statement saying that they would be joining the scheme. At which point, if I understand things correctly, they then pursued the ACNC for some kind of assurance that, given the fact that they joined the redress scheme, their charitable status would not be removed, and they gave ACNC an arbitrary deadline of 21 days to give some kind of assurance. Have I characterized things correctly?
Yeah, that's so. What I see from this is that the Australian government have been very, very serious with the organisation for a long period of time about them joining the redress scheme, and I didn't expect the ACNC to take action against the organisation until after the legislation that we've previously discussed had come into play. They've obviously looked at their options, which we can touch on later, and they've said, look, no, we've put them on notice now, and they used the current legislation as at November, which is not the legislation that we've discussed. Or that was specifically written for the organisation if you don't join the redress scheme. So they've used other means, but they're all related to child protection. They're related to utilising monies overseas and the reputation of the organisation. We can't 100% know exactly what it was that the government used because we don't have a copy of the notice. So I don't want to sort of get too far down the road and surmise as to what may or may not have been the government's position. But nonetheless, the government were very clear, and they were using what resources they had at that particular time to force the organisation to join the redress scheme. So that was in November. Time tells. They then introduced legislation in early December and mid-December to A, allow them an extension of time to join, and B, to say if you don't join, to create the consequences. So that's great, and they did that. And as time goes on, it shows that they've now done the right thing and they've joined the redress scheme. There was that notice from November outstanding, and the organisation had asked for it to be withdrawn for whatever reason, and we don't know what the government's reason for not withdrawing it was, whether it's just an administrative thing, they didn't get around to it. It did take Watchtower 2.5 years to join the redress scheme, and the copious amounts of hours that the government spent.
And they're holding the government to 21 days.
Yeah, exactly. So it's sort of like, well, it's not exactly high on their priority list to do what you want, Watchtower. Sorry, the world does not revolve around you. I don't, they're obviously, whether the government's investigating further and they wanted to hedge their bets, or they just didn't get around to it. We don't know. We can't say because we're not working for the government. But nonetheless, the government didn't withdraw the notice, and they didn't give the undertaking that Watchtower had asked them for. And quite frankly, I don't think Watchtower's entitled to just get everything that they demand, because the government's been begging them for years to do something that they've now only done because of the fact that the government's going to affect their tax status, their charitable status. So they didn't revoke it or refuse to revoke it, whatever the case may be. Watchtower have obviously, everybody knows, money is their number one concern. And so they then said, well, they then applied to the court for what they call an interlocutory injunction, which basically is an emergency style order. It's not a full hearing. It's a preliminary hearing, and they're asking the court to stop someone from doing something or to force someone to do something. So they were lodging an application to the court to say, please, can you give us an order to say that the government can't, proceed with their notice or their intentions or their notice of intention to take our status.
Am I right in saying we have that document or a similarly relevant document? Yeah. What do we have?
Yeah, we have. So we have the originating application,
okay,
and we have. There's also 2 file orders where they've made requests.
Hang on a moment. I'm going to show you all how fast and seamless I can be when I really put my mind to it. Originating application. There we go. Notice of filing and hearing. Yeah.
So that was the original one that they've lodged.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just the, sort of the commencement of the proceedings. So it shows there that Terence O'Brien and another, which is Watchtower Bible and Tract Society of Australia. So Terence is the first applicant and Watchtower the second applicants.
Mm-hmm.
And then they've set, this is just the commencing proceedings. So the applicant applies to the court to review the decision. And so that if we look there, the details of the claim, just about, can I try to go back up?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So the applicant are aggrieved by the decision because the second applicant, being Watchtower, is a company. Blah blah blah. And
it's a company. We're a company when it suits us.
Nothing like Watchtower lawyers to state the obvious.
We're God's one and only true chosen company.
But we'll let you know every time we write a legal document too.
Yeah.
And yet, obviously, taught by the ecclesiastical governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses. Got to get the governing body in there as well.
Yeah.
And so it has been registered as a charity. There's a little bit of silliness in this. There's been registered as a charity with the Australian Charities Commission since 2012. And my favourite point is, as a consequence of this registration as a charity, the second applicant is fully entitled to receive certain tax concessions. Yeah, okay, you are if you're a registered charity, but if you're not a registered charity, then you're not. And that's got nothing to do with, because you are doesn't mean you always are.
Yeah.
Very silly, but I don't,
Interesting that the tax thing is point 2. Please don't take our money from us. Please don't take our tax exemption from us. Yeah. That's quite clearly near the top of their concerns, isn't it?
Yeah. If they were to lose their charitable status, it would no longer be lawfully be entitled to those tax concessions. Yeah. Yes, correct. That is correct, Watchtower. If you don't do the right thing, you will lose your tax. So anyway, then it gets to at point 4. It gets to what the information that we do have. About what the decision was to issue the notice. So on the 24th of November, the ACNC, I think she's the assistant commissioner, notified them of the intention to take their status. And there's some wording in there in the last line of 4A. Second last. Based on findings that Miss Longley purported to have made and states of mind at which Miss Longley had arrived. That's quite misogynistic. I don't like that wording. I just thought I'd point that out.
States of mind sounds like Billy Joel. I'm in a New York state of mind. What relevance? Of what relevance is what state of mind she's in? Are they trying to suggest that she's crazy?
Well. Or that she is biased.
Right.
There could be a number of there could be a number of options. Yeah.
Or maybe she is in a New York state of mind. and they
Maybe
they take issue with that. Yeah, okay.
she's being influenced by Satan. I don't know.
Or Billy Joel. Okay.
Or Billy Joel. Maybe Billy Joel is Satan. I don't know.
Okay. Interesting.
Sorry,
So
Billy Joel.
this obviously clarifies that all of this really dates from the 24th of November.
Yep. Yep.
And
Yep.
this is what they're reacting to. Okay.
Yep.
Is there anything else
The
in particular?
The very, very key issue is at point C.
Yeah.
And it talks about governance standards number 5 and the external code of conduct standard number 4. I think I sent you through both of those. I'm not going to go through them in extensive, but I'll just show everyone what the crux of this is actually about.
Governance standards is what it is.
Yeah.
So bear with me one moment and I will show you how seamless I can be when I really, really put my mind to it. Share screen. Governance standards. Are they there? No, they're not there. Hang on. Sorry about this, everyone. Okay, so viewer, governance standards. I have to bring it up. There it is. Oh, there it is. Governance standard 5, duties of responsible persons.
Yeah. So these are the standards. They're available on the ACNC website. If anyone's interested to go through and have a really good look at it, there's explanation notes, and it talks about what the duties of responsible persons. So people like Terence O'Brien, who is a director of the organisation, the company, they're the things that he and others are responsible for. So that act with reasonable care and diligence, to act honestly, not to misuse positions, to ensure that the financial affairs of the charity are managed responsibly, and not to allow the charity to operate whilst it is insolvent, obviously. They're not insolvent. But, like I said before, we can't specifically say it was because of this or that, because we don't have the notice of intention that the government issued. What we can say is what it's not. And it's not about anything else other than the fact that the government have determined that the charity had, in their opinion, had not complied with one of the aspects of the governance standards number 5, which talks about, how to behave, et cetera, et cetera. And when you consider how they behaved in respect of the redress scheme, even the Royal Commission, they didn't handle themselves at all well. And everybody, including the government, knows that they lied their pants off in the commission. So if you look at their behaviour, they haven't acted reasonably. They haven't had care for victims of child sexual abuse. They haven't treated the victims who've made applications for redress well at all. And so, when you look at their behaviour, it's very easy to draw that conclusion that it would likely be that the government has an issue with the history and how the organisations behave. So not directly related to the redress, but it's very reasonable to draw the same conclusion that it's it's something to do with how they've conducted themselves.
Well, I think it falls under that first point, to act with reasonable care and diligence. And if they're not caring for vulnerable people in their care and making sure that victims of abuse have redress, then they're not acting with reasonable care and diligence, are they? Absolutely.
And to act honestly and fairly in the best interests of the charity and its purpose. So, have they acted honestly with Jehovah's Witnesses? My opinion is no.
No.
So then the other one was referred to as the external conduct standard number 4, protection of vulnerable individuals. It's a little bit more complicated. So when an organisation sends money overseas, and I think it's I can't remember how much it is, but obviously if you send $100, nobody cares. But if I think it's something like $20,000 or thereabouts, anything more than that, then you have external conduct standards. And my understanding, and I'm not an expert in ACNC legislation, however, my understanding is that the reason that these types of external conduct standards are put in place is so that charities in Australia are not sending money overseas to, say, terrorist organisations and to organisations that are against human rights, women. It's a protection so that they're not sending money to people like that. So this is the external code of conduct that they have. And it's very self-evident. Again, if you go to the ACNC website, there's a search bar. If you put in external conduct standard number 4, it'll bring you to all the information. And you can see on the right-hand side, it's got obligations, etc. There's a lot of information you can go into and have a look at exactly what the types of information the government have considered in making this decision. And again, this is relevant in the fact that it talks about vulnerable individuals, children under the age of 18, and given the policies and procedures and the fact that the government are aware that they're sending money to Jehovah's Witness organisations overseas, who obviously have the same policies and the same procedures, the Australian government are not happy with how the Australian the Watchtower organisation as a whole are handling child sexual abuse. They're not happy about how they're handling victims, trauma, people who leave the organisation. The government know about this. The government are on the record as having been extremely disenfranchised with the whole organisation and its policies. So, when you look at that the conduct standard, it's very easy for you to draw the conclusion that the government have said, we're not happy with how you act in Australia and we're not happy with how you act overseas, and therefore there's obviously elements of that they've picked out to say, you don't comply for this reason.
Sure. So was there anything else that we need to look at from the originating document?
Yeah. Can we just flick back to it?
Yeah, sure. I thought you might want to. And I want, again, one of the reasons why I'm asking is because it gives me an opportunity to show how seamlessly I can bring these things up on screen. And you'll notice that there's minimal kind of talking over the fact that it's taking a while to do that.
I'll talk for you.
It's
and say
almost instantaneous how quickly these things appear.
And it's not your fault. It's because I can't do it.
So we've just been discussing 4C, talking about governance standards 5 and external conduct standard number 4. Okay.
Yeah. So there was one other element that does go in there, and it's on the next page. This is all just blah blah blah. One of the other issues that they've said is, and we get to it here. Sorry, just a little bit further up, please. So it talks about the Corporations Act. No, other way. Sorry. My up and your up to. Yep, there we are. So that also talks about the Corporations Act, and there's certain legislation that's referenced in there. And basically, I looked it up. It's very boring. It just talks about when a company is incorporated, they have certain standards that they have to comply with. They've got requirements. It is very possible that there is something in the background going on, like the way the organisation are behaving, that we don't know about, and that they're not happy with how the directors of the organisation are handling certain aspects. We have no way of knowing that. We can't surmise about it because we don't know. We can't rule it out, but we have no evidence to substantiate that there is something wrong going on. What we can say is that, even just generally speaking, the government have an expectation that companies will ensure that directors handle money efficiently. And they could be drawing the conclusion that because they're not doing the right thing and engaging their organisation or their company in a government initiative by the redress scheme, that they're not acting in the best interest of that organisation or that company, and that's a responsibility of the directors. So that the application also does touch on that. But again, we don't have enough information to be able to make a concrete decision as to what it is. We can only say that the government are not happy with how Terence O'Brien and others have conducted themselves. I can only assume it's again related to the redress scheme.
Okay.
And their failure to join. I did also want to just quickly point out, I did a company search late last year, and I thought it was really strange at the time, and this could explain why. Quite a number of the directors of the Watchtower Bible Tract Society of Australia actually resigned, and they went down to 2 directors or 1 director. And I thought at the time, I wonder why that is. I suspect it has something to do with this.
Yeah, well, you never know, do you?
No.
But this is interesting. Orders sought, an order pursuant to, is it section 16?
Yeah.
And alternatively, section 23, that the respondent by his delegates, servants, agents, or otherwise be restrained from taking any further step to give effect to the matters. So they're wanting the ACNC to be restrained from revoking their... Okay.
Stop peeking on us. Yeah.
Interesting. Well,
and they won't. Oh, you'll be. I just have to point out my favourite point. Can we just go back up? Yeah. No, not too far. Too far. Just before the last page. If you roll down again, and you'll see my favourite quote, that the respondent pay the applicant's costs.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah.
That little nugget of gold.
Yeah. Please pay our volunteer team of lawyers for all of their costs. Multiple paper clips were used in preparing the and ink cartridges. What's it cost?
Many cups of coffee.
What's it cost them though to write this? They're volunteers, aren't they?
I thought so, but if we can make the government pay money, then bonus.
So the long and short of it is that the organisation has not had its charitable status revoked. Right. It only was in danger of this happening back in November, and that's old news because a lot's happened since then, as we've reported on here. And unfortunately, what we have with Keiran, whatever his name is, who writes for the Australian, Keiran Gair, is a case of incredibly lazy and sloppy journalism. And I can't help but notice that it seems almost a repeat of what happened back in December when there was other misinformation circulating in Australia, which prompted me to, with your help, write a JW Watch article explaining, because at the time people were kind of kicking up a fuss that the government extending the deadline was somehow against the interests of survivors, that this was somehow letting Jehovah's Witnesses off the hook so that they were somehow disincentivized from joining. And actually the opposite was true, because if they had allowed the deadline to expire, Jehovah's Witnesses literally would have been barred through legislation from joining the scheme.
And what had happened was that there was this, we're going to extend the time to allow people to be able to join, which, as time went by and as at today, proved to be an excellent thing because they've now joined. They couldn't have done. But also, at the same time, there was another action going on to change the legislation to remove their charitable status if they didn't join. So we had 2 things going on at the same time, and what happened was they got melded together, and they criticised the government for letting victims down by giving them another 8 years to join, and before their charitable status would be taken, which is not correct. And again, in this situation, it's also not correct. They were already on notice. Everybody knew they were on notice. The reasons, as I've pointed out today, are very straightforward. They're not the direct legislation that has been introduced for the redress scheme and the charitable status, but it all is along the same lines. The government are clearly not happy with the way the Watchtower organisation has conducted themselves, and they are serious. They mean business. the government of that's been proven time and time again. The government mean business, and they were going after them and using the current strategies or the current law that they had, and it's got nothing to do with anything other than what I've said today. It's in black and white.
It just feels a little bit like Groundhog Day, though, because I can't think of another country. Well, first of all, I can't think of another country that's doing more to hold the organisation accountable and make sure victims of abuse get redress. That's first off. Second off, I can't think of another country where there is such a problem with ex-Jehovah's Witnesses giving misinformation to the media, resulting in confusion and
it's really
sensationalism.
disappointing. It's disappointing because, if the government did nothing and were, cloak and dagger and secretive and just evasive and made promises and didn't keep them, then I could understand, some of the positions that are taken by activists within Australia. But the fact of the matter is what more can we ask from the government? They've been absolutely, we could probably ask for a lot more, but in terms of, redress for victims, what more can you ask?
Indeed, and again, we have to kind of compare with other countries because, let's be honest, Jehovah's Witnesses don't deserve charitable status in any country because they're an abusive group. The timing, having said that, the timing of removing their status in the context of them only just signing up to the redress scheme so that they could keep their status would have been a little bit, shall we say, not quite cricket, as we say in England. And maybe you say it in Australia too, because Australia is big cricketers.
Just not cricket.
It wouldn't have been cricket, would it? But nonetheless, that's what needs to happen ultimately. But, broader picture, comparing Australia with other countries, there simply isn't another country doing what Australia is doing at the moment when it comes to holding the organisation accountable and making sure survivors get the help they need. And yet you have this situation where for some, again, a small contingent of ex-Jehovah's Witnesses in Australia, nothing is good enough. And almost anything will be leapt upon as a reason to attack the government or sensationalize things or portray things in a way that's not accurate. And it must be deeply frustrating as an Australian, as someone with a legal background who understands these things, is able to read these documents and form the right conclusions, to see these lies essentially take wing so quickly.
Yeah, it is very frustrating. And the biggest reason why it frustrates me is because it creates confusion. It can detract from people's opinion about the government. And I'm not a government fan, but I am a fan of what they've done. And I think they need credit, because why would they bother to continue to help ex-JWs of all, different aspects if they constantly are getting criticised for doing a good job? And I find that really hard. The number one reason why it upsets me is because victims of child sexual abuse have been extremely traumatised in their life and continue. That's something they're going to live with for the rest of their lives, and they're very vulnerable. And when they hear things in the media, they react. And I would rather talk about it now than have a conversation very different in that, this so-and-so did something really serious and hurt themselves because of what happened. I'd rather speak up and say, this has got to stop before we have that conversation. Yeah. It affects people's lives and their mental health.
This was exactly what prompted me to step in back in December, because I realised when writing it that this would be an incredibly contentious issue, that people's feathers would be ruffled. And to be quite honest, I feel my viewers don't really like me to get involved, or they don't like to see infighting between ex-Jehovah's Witnesses. So that's why I kind of kept it off the channel entirely and just wrote an article on JW Watch. And if you go on jwwatch.org, you'll see it's the most recent article on there, and basically, called out this behaviour. But the reason why I did it and the reason why you helped me with it, as you've just outlined, is because, people's mental health is in the balance. And especially when it comes to survivors of abuse, it's easy to conceive of a survivor of abuse hearing a story and hearing that there's been this gross injustice in relation to the organization that's facilitated their abuse and something extreme happening, when in fact it's all based on misinformation. So I do take misinformation in this particular sphere extremely seriously. I know you do too. And I'm very, very grateful to you. You shouldn't really have to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning to debunk this sort of thing. There are any number of other things that we could be talking about, and any number of other things that we could be doing. Particularly, I can imagine at 5 o'clock in the morning I would be sleeping, quite frankly, if I were you. But nonetheless, it's extremely admirable that you've joined me for this live report, and I really am grateful to you, Kim, for setting things straight and spelling things out so clearly.
No problems. I did just want to put one little caveat on the end of that. As at yesterday evening, my time, so 12 hours ago, I checked the Commonwealth, the Federal Court's website. I logged in, and that's where I got all the documents from, and I checked everything. They haven't actually discontinued the court case. So Terence O'Brien is making the statement, it's all over, it's closed, it's done with, it's sold. However, it hasn't been. It was set for a listing hearing on the 15th, which was a couple of days ago. So it was set for a listing hearing, and we haven't had an update. And it could just be that the process is, going through the court system and that they'll discontinue it. I will keep an eye on any happenings. I've got a notification link on that particular case. And if and when anything does happen, if it isn't the case, I'm going to give Terence O'Brien the benefit of the doubt. Oh, gosh, that annoys me to say. But I am going to give him, he has been reasonably honest in respect to this matter. So I'll give him the benefit of the doubt that it is closed. But if that isn't correct, I will come back and
I don't think it's even necessarily about giving him the benefit of the doubt. It's what's more likely. As I've already mentioned, if there were any opportunity whatsoever to squeal persecution, knowing what we know about this organization, they would be leaping on it almost.
Oh, absolutely. So, they love it. So I believe that it is the case, but I just wanted to say, in case, that for whatever reason the government come up with something better, which I'd be happy about, or, if he in fact wasn't telling the truth, then I'll be back. Yeah.
It's important because we've just been talking all about accuracy, and part of being accurate is to give caveats like you've given. At JW Watch, we are committed to getting it right. Even if the news isn't what we want to hear, and I'm sure there were many people who logged on hoping that the Watchtower's charitable status had been removed. That's not what we're about on JW Watch, just telling you what you want to hear. I think we've had enough of that, quite frankly, as Jehovah's Witnesses, having our ears tickled every which way. What we want now is the truth. What we want now are the facts. And that's what we're about here at JW Watch. And I'm incredibly grateful to you and the rest of the team, to Mark O'Donnell, to everyone really who, and not just in JW Watch, but there are other activists as well who care passionately about the facts and want to get the facts straight. And I really appreciate you clarifying things the way you have done. And this has been our first live report. I actually envisioned this for example, Mark O'Donnell going around America, going to various court cases. He has one coming up in Chicago, and we'll be doing another live report, hopefully with Mr. O'Donnell on the ground with his microphone, maybe outside the courthouse, telling us what's going on. So that's what this format is all about. I didn't quite envision it for this particular story, but it was, again, one of those things where we need to nip things in the bud, and hopefully that's exactly what we've managed to do. So viewers, thank you so much for tuning in. Over 700 at the moment. And thank you as well to Wendy Renee on TikTok for your super chat, Andres Antonio Gonzalez Caceres, and Turnips Incorporated, and any others who I've missed. The super chats are incredibly helpful in supporting the channel and the team's work. So thank you very much indeed. That's all we have for you. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you in our next JW Watch broadcast. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.